Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So this week we are heading to Amonkhet Standard to play a deck built around one of my favorite cards from Amonkhet, and one of the cards I think people are most excited about because it works with one of the mechanics people are most excited about. We are playing Esper Haven, basically an Esper control-ish deck that is using cycling cards and discarding cards to some extent as the finisher. That's how we close out the game. Also, some of our cycling payoff cards help us stabilize while we're waiting to close out the game, but we'll talk about it more as we go along. As you can see, 100 bucks in the paper world, 65 ticks on Magic Online. A quick reminder before we break down Esper Haven: if you enjoy this deck and you enjoy Budget Magic in general, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So Esper Haven is built around primarily Drake Haven, but also Faith of the Devoted. So Drake Haven, whenever you cycle a card, you pay 1, you get a 2/2 Drake. It's a really powerful effect, especially considering there's a lot of powerful cycling cards. There's a lot of cycling cards that if you're playing a controlling Esper deck, you want in your deck anyway. And we'll talk about them as we go through the deck tech, but stuff like Cast Out, Censor, the cycling lands, those are good even without Drake Haven, so it's really easy to play Drake Haven as a finisher in a deck like that. However, you don't want to rely only on Drake Haven. So we also have Faith of the Devoted, which is kind of our backup Drake Haven. Instead of getting a Drake, we drain for 2 if we pay 1 when we cycle. So having Faith of the Devoted does 2 important things for our deck. First off, it gives us redundancy. Like, these are our ways of winning the game. We don't really have a backup plan for winning the game. We're going to win by cycling one way or another. So we want to make sure that we have one of these effects. And playing just 4 Drake Havens, you have the chance, or the slight chance, that they're all at the bottom of our deck and we just never find one of our payoffs. If we go up to 7 Drake Havens by playing Faith of the Devoted as Drake Havens 5, 6, and 7, we're much more likely to have one in a timely manner because we want to be cycling in this deck to find our good stuff, so we really want one of these or more than one of these on the battlefield when we're doing our cycling. The other thing about playing both of these is it gives us some natural protection to discard, stuff like Pick the Brain, stuff like Lost Legacy. If we were 100% in on just Drake Haven, if our opponent manages to exile all our Drake Havens, which is a thing that happens in our current standard format, not so much main deck, but definitely after sideboarding, a lot of Lost Legacies, a lot of Pick the Brains, cards like that, we have a backup and a way to win the game. So it kind of diversifies our finishers. So this is kind of the foundation of the deck. We want to stick at least one of these, preferably 2 or 3 or 4 as the game goes along, and then we just cycle cards and generate a huge advantage. So as far as cycling, the big ones are Censor, Cast Out, and Hieroglyphic Illumination, and these are the cards I were talking about that are really good on their own. If you're playing a controlling deck, or even some non-controlling decks, you just want these cards in your deck because they're very powerful, and cycling is just upside, and it's a double upside in our deck because cycling is how we win the game. So Censor, counter something on turn 2 in the late game when it doesn't do anything because our opponent can pay 1, we can cycle it away, get some Drakes, drain some life. Cast Out, one of the best removal spells in Standard, the closest thing we have to like a Hero's Downfall that gets a Planeswalker at instant speed, along with creatures and other non-creature permanents. Again, 1 mana cycling. And the other thing we looked at with these cards, and you see this with Hieroglyphic Illumination, is they all are 1 for cycling. And one of the pinches in the deck is on mana. Once we have multiple Drake Havens, Faith of the Devoteds out, we really want as much mana as possible because ideally we'll be able to cycle, pay a mana for each of our payoff cards, and then maybe even cycle again, pay another mana for each of our payoff cards. So the cheaper cycling costs are really key to this deck. Hieroglyphic Illumination, basically in the Glimmer of Genius slot. Upside is we can cycle it, make some Drakes, drain some life. draws us 2 cards at instant speed. Then we have the cycling lands as well. This is why the cost of the deck is a little bit expensive, like at the maximum of our budget decks, but we really need these. Having cycling lands just gives us so much more cycling. We have so many more cyclers per cubic foot when we can play cycling lands as well, that they're really essential. So again, in the early game, they're just a tap land. As we go along and have our Drake Havens and Faith of the Devoteds, they turn into finishers, or they trigger our finishers. The rest of the deck, and probably my favorite combo of the deck, is Pull from Tomorrow, which is sneakily good with Drake Haven and Faith of the Devoted. So this does 2 different things. First off, it draws us a ton of cards, and it is just the best control card. I mean, you can argue Torrential Gearhulk, but probably the best control card in Standard. It's close to Sphinx's Revelation. In our deck, though, the discard a card part of it is an upside. So if we have a Drake Haven out, we can Pull from Tomorrow for all of our mana -1, and when we discard the card, we make a Drake. The other cool thing about Pull from Tomorrow is in the late game, it gives us this combo finish. So we can wait till the end of our opponent's turn, Pull from Tomorrow X10 or something. That's going to give us so many cards that we're going to have to discard to hand size. And when we discard to hand size at the end of our turn, every card we discard is going to trigger all of our Drake Havens, all of our Faith of the Devoteds, and allow us to just close out the game right away. We get this huge stack of triggers because we discarded like 4 or 5 cards. And that's the sneaky thing about Drake Haven and Faith of the Devoted, is it doesn't just trigger when we cycle, and that's primarily what we do, but it triggers on discarding cards as well. The rest of the deck, we just have some stay alive stuff. Blessed Alliance gains us some life, kills an attacker. Emulating Glare kills an attacker. Fumigate to sweep the board, gain us some life, and then some counter spells. Essence Scatter for early game creatures, Negates to fight Aetherworks Marvel, Spell Shrivel. I mean, it's fine in the deck. Disallow is better, I believe. Void Shatter might be better, except for the mana cost, but it's a good 3 mana counterspell. And exiling stuff is actually really relevant in a world of zombies and recursive threats, so being able to get rid of a Relentless Dead or something permanently, a Dread Wanderer permanently, is a really big upside over a Disallow. The rest of the mana base, we already talked about the cycling lands. 4 Shambling Vents is an additional dual, 4 Evolving Wilds for our tricolor deck, and then some basic lands to search out. In the sideboard, I have one of my favorite cards that doesn't see play in Standard in Glyph Keeper, and this kind of gives us a transformational sideboard plan. So if you notice, our main deck doesn't have any real creatures. It seems unlikely that most opponents are going to leave in Fatal Pushes in Grasp of Darkness to deal with our Drakes, because they just overwhelm the board. That you need to stop the Drake Haven, and you're not going to be able to use targeted removal to get through the Drakes. That just isn't a practical plan, because there's always more coming. Plus, you just lose to Faith of the Devoted anyway. So the idea is that our opponent will take out their targeted removal, and then we can bring in Glyph Keeper, which is super hard to kill. It takes a sweeper or 2 removal spells to kill it in a turn. Your opponent has to like Harness Lightning, it gets countered, Harness Lightning again, something along those lines. So this is our sneaky way to bring this in and just beat our opponent down really quickly in the air. It speeds up our clock, and if our opponent takes out most or all of their targeted removal, it's just going to be impossible to kill in the air. Archfiend, kind of the same idea, except this is primarily for go wide decks. If your opponent's playing a bunch of zombies and we can stabilize with our removal and so forth, Archfiend plus a couple of cyclers just wipes away the board and leaves a huge threat in the air. Then we have a bunch of control stuff. Lay Bare the Heart, discard, gets rid of something from our opponent's deck, a counter spell that would hit our Drake Haven or whatever. Negates and Spell Shrivels, more counters for Aetherworks Marvel, control matchups. Sphinx of the Final Word, another creature we can bring in. This one's primarily for controlling mirrors. Bring this in. It's just so hard to deal with. Again, our opponent's probably going to take out removal. It's just so hard to deal with. Beat our opponent down. And then for aggro, we have a Renewed Faith for some more cycling, also life gain, and an additional Fumigate. And that is Esper Haven for Amonkhet Standard, and that's our budget magic deck for this week. So I think this deck is really sweet, it's really fun, it's pretty competitive, the engine is super good. The challenge of the deck is making sure we live long enough for our engine cards to matter. So if we're playing really aggressive decks, we got to make sure that we have a hand that can keep us alive for 4, 5, 6 turns. If we just get immediately beaten down, then our Drake Havens and our Faith of the Devoted aren't good. Once we get up to like 5, 6, 7 mana, things go really well for us because we don't even need to win the game with our finishers right away. We can just stay alive with our finishers, cycle something, make a Drake for chump blocking, drain our opponent, gain some life with Faith of the Devoted. We do this repeatedly. Sooner or later, our opponent's going to have a hard time killing us. We're still making our land drops, and then we're drawing more Drake Havens and Faith of the Devoted. So eventually, when we're cycling, we're getting 2 Faith of the Devoted triggers, gaining 4 life, draining our opponent for 4, and once we get to that point, the game closes out really quickly. So the upside of the deck is once it gets going, it's very hard to stop. We have all the pieces to deal with just about anything in our deck. The challenge, like I said, is making sure we keep hands that can get to the long game, and having Blessed Alliance and Emulating Glare and Censor and Cast Out and Fumigate definitely helps there, but I think our weakest matchups are probably aggro when our opponent gets a really aggressive draw, because in theory, they can just get us to dead with a great draw before our Drake Havens and Faith of the Devoteds even do anything, especially if our draw is a little slow. But I think the deck's really fun. It's pretty competitive. It uses a lot of cool cards and cool mechanics, so I'm excited for it. Anyway, that's been our deck tech for Esper Haven in Amonkhet Standard. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, take a second and click that like button down below. It's a great way to help support the channel for free, and you can find the next video in the playlist right here.